And then for those of you that are with us on Facebook, I'm going to be moderating the Facebook Live. So if you have questions there, I will ask them for you. So make sure your question gets answered. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and put you on Spotlight, and let's get started.
Awesome. Hello, welcome. Thank you for being here. As Leah mentioned, these are different times, right? And so I pulled a couple of cards this morning, and I wanted to open that. I pulled the Ace of Swords, and the Ace of Swords is really telling me, like, make sure I'm getting a clear download of what I want to share today. And that's what I've been spending my morning doing, is really getting clear about what I think is really important right now. Right? I think we are all kind of taking this one day at a time, which is so important. And I don't think, especially myself, I'm a Virgo sun. So I really love my planner. I really like to look days out ahead and really like put things in. And with so much uncertainty, it's really had me flexing my different muscles of responsiveness and agility. And I think there's such an opportunity right now. And I think astrology really can help us understand that kind of liminal space that we're really all in. So thank you for being here. I'm excited to share this kind of content with you, but I'm also excited to hear what your questions are. So like she said, please do raise your hand. I can't see everyone in the scroll. So if it feels like I'm ignoring you, type in the chat. I do have the chat box open. So, and like she said, Leah will be moderating Facebook. So we'll get to all of that. And at the end, I'll go through the questions that I missed, and we'll go back to it if that's what's needed. So I always like to start everything that I do with a little centering, because I know I need it. And so I'm certain that it helps others. So if you just want to find a comfortable seat, I like to plant my feet on the ground, but if you're in an easy pose, that's cool too. Finding just where your body meets whatever's supporting you. And I like to put my hand on my heart. I like to close my eyes and take a breath. And I'm going to light a candle for us. And this time, this is the end of the ritual candle for the new moon in Aries, which was just a couple of days ago. Red to ignite the fire within, to ignite that creative purpose that I think is so alive right now. When we think of all the things that have shut down, when we think of all the things that have kind of slowed to a halt, what we have is our innate power. And that begins with that breath. So taking deep breaths, noticing how your breath is right now, noticing the quality and texture of the breath. And then you might begin to deepen that breath a little bit, breathing in the nose, filling your belly, imagining that breath kind of expanding all the way through the crown of your head and out into your upper chakras that surround your body. And exhaling, visualizing that breath going down and out through your legs into the earth, grounding you, anchoring you in this moment. And then bringing that inhale again, both from those ends of your body, from the crown of your head and from the feet and from your perineum, and bringing it into your heart, into the bridge, the fourth chakra, where all that energy meets. This is where our awareness is, I think, best used. When we can bring our light of awareness into our hearts, we're in a place of this is that place where we can settle into the soul of our being. It's the seat of the soul. So when we navigate our lives with this heart space, there's a gentle kind of grace that we can find for ourselves and for others, especially in these times, but always. And there may be something on your heart today. You might have a purpose or an intention that you brought with you today, something that piqued your interest about this class, or even just being in community and anchoring. I know for me, this was the anchor point in my day, to be with all of you and to nerd out about astrology and how we can support ourselves through some of this work and these archetypal languages. So I invite you to stay here in this heart space through all of this. And with that, one more deep breath, coming back to the room. Maybe opening your eyes, kind of reacclimating yourself with a screen. Okay. So being the Virgo self I am, I created some slides for this just to help guide me, as well as offer an anchor for you, some visual. And let's see how. I think I have to share my screen before I present this, so let me do that first. Okay. Hmm.
Is it not letting you share?
It's letting it, well, can you see my screen?
I can't.
You can or can't?
Cannot.
No. Okay, let me see.
But if you share screen and then top left, that's usually the screen that will pop you into share.
Oh, I see. So yeah, and it'll pop me in.
Yeah, there you
There
go.
we go. Okay, so now I need to do the presentation part of it. So, because it's, yeah, I just didn't follow through the prompt. Okay, here we go. So I called this class Astrological Healing for Challenging Times because that was on my heart. And, you know, I'm an astrologer. I read tarot. I do lots of different things. I'm an herbalist. And at first I was thinking, oh, I could mash together herbalism and offer herbal allies alongside this. And then it felt like a lot. And so I kind of dialed it back to just like anchor ourselves. So I'm curious too, and now I can't see the chat if I'm in this place. But if you know, I'd love to know what your, you know, are you familiar with astrological signs? Are you familiar with house systems? You know, do you consider yourself kind of a astro geek too? Or are you, you know, in any way, I'm gonna do something a little different because I think this is
If it,
hard for me.
I can handle that chat, just FYI.
You want to? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's cool. All right, perfect. Sorry for the.
No problem. We're figuring this out. All right, ladies. So where are you in astrology? I would say, like, I know I'm an astrological geek. I know Sarah Loomis is an astrological geek.
Right on.
How about you? If maybe raise your hand if you're an astro geek. Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
So,
and then if you kind of like know a little bit.
Yeah, wherever
familiar.
you're at. I mean, you know, if you know, like, here's the thing is one of the things that I really love about this work is how it's just a series of rabbit holes. And, you know, depending on how far down the rabbit hole you've gone, you see that it's kind of endless. There is this really kind of endless ability to, you know, dive in. And every time I even look at my own chart, especially through different transits, I'm like, ooh, this is what's up for me right now. And this is a normal house system that I'm showing you right now. You can see that there is, you know, the first house here and all of the symbols. Right now, I'm not asking you to know all these symbols. You don't need to know this. But what I like to work with is this house system. And so I notice how transits go through my house system in order to understand maybe what is being asked for me to focus on. And so I guess I'm curious too, do you work with the house system? Have you noticed, where your sun sign is in your house system? My sun sign happens to be in the 4th house. So it's one of the interesting lessons I think I took on is to be home, right? There's this sense that, the 4th house is about home and family of origin. So, many of us with the sun sign in the 4th house, we're here to break ancestral wounds. We're here to, really settle into our home selves. And so in astrology, we kind of systematize the aspects of our lives according to this house system. So it can be really, really helpful to take a look at where something is in your chart, not just the sign, right? Like maybe many of you who are geeking out know that we just had this new moon in Aries. And the next part of it is, what house did that happen for you in? Where did you just have that new moon? Right. So using some of just one level more. And I see things lighting up.
Yeah. Okay. Question. So I have, let's see, my sun is in the 9th house, and then I hope I'm going to like ruin your name. I'm so sorry. Mayeli. Mayel. Okay.
Yeah.
Her house is in the 8th house. Her sun is in the 8th house. Laura Looney, her sun is in the 12th.
Yeah.
That deep connection to God.
Yeah.
Terry Goddard, my son is in the 2nd house.
Yeah.
Laura knows her new moon was in the 1st house.
Yeah. So, right. So like so there's this sense that it's so dynamic. It feels like a lot of information. And, whatever, I think in terms of using astrology for healing, in the moment, whatever feels juicy for you can be a way in. Just like any divine path, any spiritual path can serve you, right? It doesn't matter really, what God or gods or goddesses or divine purpose or the one, there's all these things that kind of give you this way into recognizing that we are kind of part of something larger. We're spiritual beings. And astrology is the same way. So anything that feels really juicy for you can be a way in. So this is, so I'm curious, Leah, does my screen then show everybody's faces on the side too?
On Facebook?
Well, anywhere, I guess, because it's blocking the words right now.
Oh, got it. They can all move that far.
Okay. All right. So this is a list kind of the aspects that the houses represent. It's pretty easy to find. So you can, and I've really dialed it down. You can get, house structures that are lists of things, right? So this is really quote unquote dumbed down, and right now, being that it just was this new moon in Aries, and Aries is associated with the 1st house, we've just had this new moon about self and beginnings, right?
Yeah.
So everybody, no matter where Aries is in your chart, you're experiencing kind of this renewal of self, right? Renewal of self-esteem, reclaiming of power. And it's this beginning kind of space. And it really is, the new moon in Aries always happens around the beginning of springtime.
Can we back up really quickly?
Yes.
Okay. So if you want, it's really easy to get your chart. Can you tell someone like where to go download their chart so that they can like come back to this maybe later and like understand a little bit more about what you're talking about?
Absolutely. So you can go to astro-charts.com, and maybe that can be in the chat box, astro-charts.com. They have really simple charts. In fact, they even write out on the outer elliptic here instead of use only symbols. I know some of the online tools, I use AstroDeist and I use Ephemeris. If you're a super nerd, get Ephemeris, which is an app, and it's pretty amazing. I have
Can
a
you spell
chart to
that?
show you. It's Ephemeris. So I, like little I, and then EPHER. Let me look at my app to make sure I'm still. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Yeah. IPHEMERIS. Ephemeris.
.com, or it's an app?
It's an app.
Okay.
So, and it costs, $15 or something like that, but it's probably the best $15 I've spent in astrology, because you can look at the chart of now. Now that is kind of in some ways next level. It will stretch your brain to know all these symbols, but if you've already learned some of the language of symbols in astrology, it's kind of fun to look at daily where the charts are now. Astro-charts.com will do that as well. You can look at the chart of a now, and you can see the transits. You can pull up your own chart. You just need your birth time to really get all of the information, because your birth time really talks about when you took your first breath, right? And so that's what starts the house structure, is that timing. So to get a really accurate house natal chart structure, you will need your birth time.
Yeah, got it. Okay. Got it. So now we're moving on. This is great. Thank you so much.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you for saying that. I think when not knowing where everyone's at, I don't want to go over a billion things that people are like, yeah, got it. So one of the things that I think is really, really important, because when I think of what really serves me in terms of astrology, has been my deep dives into lunar alignment. And right now it's really buzzy. Everybody's talking about watching the moon, doing new moon rituals, full moon rituals, all of that stuff. And I think that's amazing that that's becoming part of our language in this culture in and of itself. But what's really important is how it feels to you, right? So I might have a download of how this new moon is affecting me, but that may be completely different than how you would experience it. Many of my clients, on the new moon feel as if what is, categorically or supposed to be how someone feels at a full moon time, right? So there's no right or wrong way to kind of experience a new moon. And when you start to work with your chart and the moon's cycles, you can really understand, why that may be so. And so it begins with a simple inward practice, right? It's not necessarily looking at the chart and trying to figure out the chart and trying to figure out where everything is. It's really aligning yourself with lunar time. And I put together this slide to just remind us and myself, it's like, what are the teachings of the moon? It teaches us the value of understanding impermanence, right? That we have cyclical nature. There's also energetic signatures. And then it helps you to remind yourself to check in with your intuition, right? So many people in this time, I think, are starving for, being aligned with their intuition. Like, how do I know when it's intuition and not programming, right? Social programming is huge. How do I know when I'm actually in alignment and hearing my own intuition and not just some, thing that I learned? And so having a practice that is aligned with the moon can really, I think, help us. And I'll talk about each of these things a little bit more. So what is lunar alignment, right? So just simply asking, where is the moon and where am I? Right? So if the moon right now, today it's 1 degrees Taurus, it just moved out of Aries into Taurus today. And the moon moves quite quickly, okay? It goes through each sign every 2 or 3 days. And whereas the sun, right, the sun, it takes a full 20 or 30, to 30 days, right? That's the month right? That's the sun sign that you have is based on that solar zodiac. So it goes through every sign within a year. But the moon does that annual trip through the zodiac that the sun takes every month. So where you only have the ability to kind of work with, well, only those energies on a power level, right? With the sun, if you're following sun signs, you're like, oh yeah, this is Aries season. Here's this Aries season. But the moon is going to go through every single sign. So it kind of changes the flavor. It's like having your vanilla milkshake and you're like, well, I'm going to add strawberry to it this day. And then I'm going to add chocolate to it this day. And then, so it kind of, because it changes the flavor as it goes through that. So then what does it feel like to be in Aries season when the moon's in Taurus? You might ask yourself that very question today. And not just what is that, but what does it feel like for me? Do you feel more or less grounded today than you did yesterday? There's no right answer for that. It's one of those things that you might journal. And there's a lot of really great ways to kind of keep track. I use the moon is my calendar, which has a circular calendar, and you can track your kind of emotions a little bit each day. Notice when you bleed, notice when you're feeling a little agitated. And sometimes there's patterns that emerge after you've been tracking that for a little bit. So it's really interesting to, it's like one of those dreams where you lose it if you don't put it down, right? So just mentioning, yeah, today I feel really grounded. Today I feel really powerful. Well, when was the last time I felt so in alignment with that? Where's the moon? Where am I? And you can start to maybe even for my Virgo self, I love to like plan. It's like, okay, well, I'm not going to go and do this on that day because I'm going to be all over the place. So mentoring with the moon, using the moon kind of as your teacher is one of the things that I think in these times are really, really helpful. Remembering the moon is still going, I think in the Northern Hemisphere, we're very lucky right now. Spring is happening regardless of all the things, like spring's not canceled. And so, but in the Southern Hemisphere, they're dipping into the fall. And that's actually been on my heart a lot lately, thinking about folks who are now going into the dark half of the year with all of this going on. And so how does the inner and outer play, right? For me. And, within this practice, honoring ourselves is key. It's always central. I think no one gets to tell us how we experience anything. And maybe going through and feeling into these moon cycles, you're like, you know what? I don't have any patterns that are emerging or whatever. I haven't met anyone who hasn't said that it hasn't been a deep practice, regardless of like how it syncopates or how it synergizes, right? Because even if you just spend that time, creating space, for growth and death, like noticing how I'm letting go, right? That's that practice of at the full moon we release, at the new moon we set intentions. So right now, as this moon is growing full, we're in this time of calling in what we need, calling in the resources. And, from a high level archetypally, Taurus is a perfect kind of energy to work with gaining resources. It's the second sign of the zodiac. It's where our personal money is. It's where our personal resources, it's our energy. It's the fixed earth sign. And so today, as the moon is in Taurus, asking that question, like, can I pull in my resources? And depending on your practice, you might even light a candle around that, put that on your altar, however that works for you, reimagining how you might pull in some new resources today. So I wanted to share too, is there questions or anything? Okay.
No.
If anybody has any, like, even if you're like, this makes sense, this doesn't make sense, please let me know. I think you know, I try with my visuals to kind of give people a sense of what is actually happening. So this is the actual moon cycle we're in right now. Okay, we just had the new moon. It's at 12 o'clock, right? The new moon was on the 24th and it was in Aries. Okay, and this is what is called the cardinal lunation. There's 4 cardinal signs in the zodiac. And cardinal signs begin seasons. So Aries begins spring, right? Cancer begins summer, Libra begins fall, and Capricorn begins winter. All the cardinal signs begin the seasons. All and it's, so that happens at that cross quarter, or that quarter. And so all of those cardinal signs are activated by the moon cycle, this moon cycle. And it's the most powerful cardinal lunation because it begins with Aries, which is it's that cardinal fire sign, it's the spark. So this time of year, it's not just that the especially in the northern hemisphere, and I've been thinking a lot, so my head is kind of spinning around the southern hemisphere and what that means for those of us who are not experiencing spring. I just keep thinking about that, so I'll have to deep dive into that but it's interesting to think about how beginning something, Aries are known kind of for beginning things, maybe not finishing them, but they're willing to go first. They're willing to step out into the unknown. And it's really interesting that that's where we're kind of at right now. And, I'm curious if people have really experienced that, where it's just like when the new moon happened on the 24th, which was 3 days ago, right on Tuesday morning, happened very early in the morning. Did anybody have a little bit more hope that day? For me, it really did shift. I started to think about ways to get through this, ways to support myself without a lot of chatter. Last week, I think I felt as though, I was kind of all over the place and surviving. And this week helped me feel a little more ignited. And not just that, it's almost like a pep talk from the universe. And so for me, like astrological healing, when you know that these energies are at play, it feels like we have allies in the cosmos. We really do have these allies that are like, hey, look, remember, things begin again, stuff shifts, right? Nothing is permanent. And not just that, but it moves as quickly as it's pulled by. It's like a push and a pull, right? Because there's not just us pushing. We're also in some ways drawing things into us. So how do we stand in our power, I think, is one of these lunations, and go and get what we want, right? This is really it's an activating lunation, which is really helpful as an ally, I think, at this time.
Jennifer, we have 2 questions.
Yeah, please.
Okay. So, is it normal to feel anxious when the moon is in your moon sign? From Laura.
I think normal is a problematic word when we talk about this. I'll just say that, but I don't think we have a lot of language to say like, hey, so it's not to say that that's not, everything is normal in some way. I think that it's normal to feel anyway during a new moon. Something gets activated. So that's what I like to use so if your anxiety, or what is the word she used?
She used anxious.
Anxious, yeah. If there's anxiousness, is it every new moon? Is a question I'd ask for myself if I was experiencing anxiety around new moon time. And if it is every new moon, thinking about what about that cycle. New moons are about that dark womb space, right? It's that dark space where we sit in our own stuff, right? It really is about being, what's physically astronomically happening is the sun and the moon are rising together. So we don't get to see the illumination of the sun against the moon, right? The moon's an a luminary. It doesn't have its own light. It relies on the sun to light it up, right? And so what about that feels really anxiety about us? I think there's themes of, being vulnerable and fear of vulnerability, which I think we are programmed to feel, because vulnerability is powerful. Because when we see each other clearly, no one gets to take that kind of connection from us, right? When we feel aligned, and all of a sudden, like even right now, my body, like I just blushed out in goosebumps. When I feel aligned and connected, no one can convince me that I'm not. And so that vulnerable place is really powerful. And I think we have often, we've learned to fear that dark place, that quiet, dark place. And so while I would say, yeah, I mean, I think in our culture, especially, it's quite normal to feel, anxiousness. And I invite everyone to think about what anxiousness feels like in your body, right? It's a sensation. And we get to decide what that means in some ways. People who love bungee jumping and roller coasters might have that same body sensation, but they think it's amazing.
Right.
They don't think it's anxiousness. And not to say that your anxiousness is not worthy of your attention and your care and your naming it for what it is, right? That's real for you. But I just, from a perspective of new moon time, being like, lean into that.
That's great. Thank you. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you for that question.
For sure. We have one more.
Okay.
What does it mean for an Aries sun when the moon enters Aries as well? Ooh, that's a good question.
Yeah.
And also using this time to start creative projects and getting to know myself.
Yeah. I mean, that's so aligned, right? I mean, I think whenever the moon and sun are in your sun sign, you have this opportunity. The moon represents the feminine, the sun represents the masculine, and I'm not talking about gender. This is that kind of polar dynamic, those dualities that we all have within us. So when those merge in the sky, we're learning to merge them within ourselves. What does it look like to be productive and reflective? What does it look like to be vulnerable and strong? What does it look like? Those are the things that I think we can actually really work on when the sun and moon are in alignment overall. But when it's activating our sun sign, it might be a time, have a personal holiday. Like this is in so many ways there's so like tap into that energy and be like, wow, what does that mean for me? Because I guarantee it meant something different on your, when you were 12 than when you were 24, than when, I'm 41. It's like, wow, when I have those alignments or activations, it's like, and all of me is with me, right? You notice you're like, ooh, I don't feel the same. Now, we may feel more vulnerable in some ways, right? I'm a mother now. I had this invincibility in my early 20s that I don't feel like I have anymore. But yeah, I think there's something activated for sure. And again, it's really about, where am I? How am I feeling? And I think that's the guiding question for this work. How am I feeling? How am I experiencing things? And not just, I think a lot. I'm a very mercurial person. And so I have to remember to feel. And so learning my intuition and having this relationship with the moon has actually allowed me more access to a range of emotions than I think I had earlier in my life. And I think that's also at play too. Because I think a lot of our thoughts we think are our feelings. I don't know if that resonates with other people, but it certainly is true for me. And some of us have emotions that feel like truth or feel like thoughts. Maybe, there's like so many different ways I think we experience our bodies trying to survive. Yeah. Mayal, I see you. You're just like, yeah.
Definitely. I have a lot of Aquarian energy. So for me, I have to like, I'm in my head all the time. And I'm just like always up here. Yeah, I'm the Ace of Swords, baby.
Yes. Well, and how does that teach us, right? Like Saturn just moved into Aquarius. You know, we can talk about what that has done for us. Right before the new moon in Aries, Saturn moved into Aquarius. It's just for a short time. It's going to retrograde back in order to conjunct Jupiter actually at 0 degrees Aquarius. I mean, this is huge kind of, that's that grand conjunction that's happening at the end of this year. It only happens every 20 years, which means every 10 years there's an opposition of Saturn and Jupiter, right? Saturn and Jupiter are these dancing planets that when you look at their cycles in your life, you know, you've heard of a Saturn return. I'm really big with Jupiter returns because Jupiter is expansive and asks you to grow. And it's a 12-year cycle. It's actually really interesting to think of how I'm 12, how I'm 24, how I'm 36. It's like a Jupiter cycle is big deal. And it goes about a year it takes to get through each sign. So noticing where Jupiter is can help you. If you need positivity and optimism, I think Jupiter is a really good place to look too. And it's about to move into Aquarius. So it's wanting us to expand the collective. That's what this time,
Wow.
You know, for all the shit that it feels like right now that we have to, so many people are finally getting through their barrier of what it means to actually be on these spaces and be like, yeah, we can do this.
So I don't know if you can see the chat, Jennifer, but it looks like there's a whole lot of Aquarius.
Whole lot of Aquarius. So that's interesting. So just the fact that you're feeling called to even be here and you're all usually who come to my work, I work with a lot of Capricorns. Don't know why that is. Like all these Capricorn energies. But yeah, Aquarius energy is being activated right now and you're being called to action. And the fact that Saturn moved into Aquarius on the 22nd, it'll be there, I think, until July. It just goes a couple degrees, right? It moves very slow. And then these moons, these new moons, these lunar cycles, this cardinal cycle is the cardinal cycle before it goes back to retrograde, I think. Because I think that during the Cancer lunation, right? So beginning with the new moon in Cancer, which happens in June, that's when it goes back into retrograde. So we'll kind of get part of that cardinal lunation. But when you think about cardinal energy, initiatory energy, there's all these initiations happening right now. So especially as Aquarius or where Aquarius is in your chart, you're being activated, you're being called upon. And it's collective energy. You know, Aquarius is, it sees the win-win in everything. It wants to collect people. You know, Leah, it's no surprise that you're stronger. You're like, let's pull people together. Let's bring collective strength, you know, and there's this new term that I'm just in love with that I found, which is collective care, you know, and that's what social distancing is right now, is collective care. Wow. I think we've been so programmed to take care of ourselves. What does it look like to be in collective care? You know, and sometimes that means, you know, figuring other things out than just going about your business and having ultimate freedom, which is also what Aquarius wants. Right. Right. But Aquarius wants ultimate freedom. It's not willing to destroy the collective for that freedom. So what does that mean? This is the question of these times. And when Saturn, which is the restrictor, the rule maker, the lawmaker, the government, goes into Aquarius, it's like, well, freedom's restricted. How many people found themselves on lockdown on that day or leading up to that day?
Wow. What day was it?
Saturn was starting to pressurize. It was like, you know, and then it was like, you know, and everybody's like, we're home now.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Everyone take a breath.
I know.
All right.
Don't forget you're made for this time either. You chose to be here. So any of the stories that are causing you to feel like a victim or a martyr, Yes,
Mm,
acknowledge them, but it's also a lie. You chose this.
got it.
So
Thank you,
embrace yourself.
Mama.
Embrace yourself.
Okay, I got a question
Okay.
from Sarah, and then I'll get to Mael's question.
Okay.
I have a question about those larger transits. That is all transitioning over my Mars in Capricorn in the 12th house and my moon in Aquarius in the 12th house. It's kicking my ass. How do I get through this? It feels so heavy. Saturn, Jupiter, Mars, and Pluto. Ugh.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So, knowing this is the first step, right? The knowledge, it's like the yo-jo. Knowing is half the battle. So you know this is happening. I love the question, how do I love myself through this today? And your brain will go to work. So brain work, I always bring it to the brain, especially if you're, used to using your mind as a tool. Note that it will go to work on whatever. So if it's like, if it's asking questions like, that are self-defeating, your brain's gonna go to work. So ask good questions like, how am I gonna love myself today? How am I gonna love myself through this? How am I gonna work with this weight? So you say heavy. It's so interesting to think about that weight. And I'd love to know what house that's all happening in, by the way. You said 12th house?
Yeah, she said 12th house.
So Mars is in the 12th house, which Mars is there now anyway. So Mars entered Capricorn this month, I think. And so, Mars joined this stellium party in Capricorn. There's an astrologer who does a podcast. His name's Adam. And we can post this in the group maybe after so people can check it out. He's calling all these transits going through Capricorn the boneyard, which I think has been a really helpful lesson for me to think about this as the boneyard. What are we excavating right now out of this boneyard? And for those of you, I know some others, and I don't know if they're here, but who have a lot going on in Capricorn already. And so now that all of this is activating, the good news is since there's so much there, it'll pass. But it takes some time. So Pluto's going to be in Capricorn until 2024. And Pluto is the great transformer planet. And so anyone who has these placements that are being activated in their Capricorn, look at Capricorn tools. What are the Capricorn tools? Making discipline is a Capricorn tool. Adulting, you're being asked to get your finances in order. You're being asked to really structure your life so it supports it. It's the foundation. So any cracks in your foundation, now is the time to work with the energy to really get clear about what's not working. I want to say too that the Mercury retrogrades last year and this year are all happening in water signs. So it's balancing that earth energy with the feminine water signs. Mercury wants us to remember to feel this time, to work through the trauma of this time as it's happening so that we don't have to deal with the post-trauma later and have it reverberate and echo all the time. So it's asking us to work with our nervous systems. I think especially Capricorn energy asks us to be in our bodies, right? It's cardinal earth energy. It manifests. So what are you manifesting right now? By the way, you're probably doing it. If you're not doing it consciously, it's happening unconsciously. So what's showing up? What opportunities are showing up, or what's falling away, right? And to also just find a body practice that feels aligned to ground that heaviness, and find something that lifts you. So looking at the opposite point in that chart, right? When we look at Capricorn, the lunar nodes are there too, okay? So that's an extra thing that's happening with Capricorn right now. That will shift in a couple of months. We're going to have the lunar nodes shift. They're always in retrograde. So they're going to shift back to Gemini, Sagittarius, I think in June. And that's when I think this quarantine will probably settle out, is when the lunar nodes shift. There's a lot of other things happening, but so that Cancer Capricorn lunar node is also in action. So if you look across your chart, what's happening in Cancer in your chart? And there may be some medicine there, right? Cancer is the mothering aspect, the nourishing aspect. How do we nourish ourselves? Right? If the weight is so heavy, how do we get stronger? How do we strengthen our emotional resilience, our nervous system resilience? I think this is a good question for all of us, because we are being challenged by this. Everyone's experiencing that Capricorn stellium somewhere in their chart. And it may be more intense. And you probably have a lot of medicine for those that maybe aren't experiencing it so intensely, but you're getting like this crash course. I don't know if that's helpful.
Yes, woman. Yes. Okay, wait. Sarah says yes, Barry. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. We have one question, but you kind of went over it a little bit. Let me just ask, and then you can come back to it. Can you elaborate a little on the planets return retrograde? There's an etc., but I'm not sure.
The planets return and retrograde. So each planet has its own transit. I think this is what maybe you're getting at. Each planet has its own transit, which means that it goes through this in astrological terms, okay? I'm no astronomer. My husband tries to tell me all the time. But in astrology, we track it by going through the signs. So every planet has a return. And most of us have heard of a Saturn return, right? It happens around 29 and a half years. So that's the planet, it's the principle. It's like, hey, you signed up for this course to come on Earth and do this work. How's it going? Have you finished it? What's going on? You know, and then it'll like be like, you know, rumble things up if it's needed and all of that. Jupiter has a transit of 12 years. And, you know, Mars is like 2 years. Hey, terrible twos kind of situation, right? The sun obviously has a 1 year. So working with solar cycles alone, if that feels called to you, if you're working to heal masculine energy, that can, you know, all the planets have masculine energy except for Venus, right? And then that's why there's these asteroids. That's a whole nother rabbit hole. But when we look at the retrogrades, so a transit will go, and Jupiter goes retrograde, Saturn goes retrograde, everything goes retrograde. I think we pay attention to the Mercury retrogrades most because prior to, you know, very recently, that's the only one that really felt relevant. But when you start to think about the Aquarian age, we're all thinking of the collective. So there's these inner planets that are kind of personal planets, and they affect us a little more, right? Like Mercury can really fuck up your own stuff. It'll break your car down and shit up your internet and break your phone. Not really, but but it's one of those where we can see it. It goes retrograde 2, 3 or 4 times a year, right? This year it's going to go 3 times. And so those are the times of review, and it basically scrubs over. Like if you look at your chart and you, I don't have my, there's it's almost like, can you see my mouse? Yeah. Okay. So, right. So Mercury, of course, I don't know where he is right now. Let me see if because I think it's helpful to kind of see this. There's ways to look at, it's almost as though, I feel like Mercury's in Virgo right now. So it went through Pisces, right? It was like, it's going along, it's cruising along. And at 28 degrees Aquarius, it hit the quote pre-shadow phase, right? So it goes over these 15 degrees of a chart, and then it turns retrograde, stations retrograde, and it goes backwards, and then it goes forwards again. So it's scrubbing, oh, I clicked a thing. It's scrubbing over a certain part. Now I've turned it. How confusing is that? So in your house system is going to be different than this, okay? And that's why, you know, get used to the shifting, because your house system is not going to look like this. It's not going to look like the other one, okay? In terms of signs. Your house system will always have the bottom 6 houses here, the top 6 houses here. It will do that, but the signs are going to shift, okay? So your chart will look different than this. But so a Pisces retrograde for the Mercury, it just scrubs over 3 times. It goes forward, it goes backwards, it goes forwards. Planets all do that. Leah, do you have a clarifying question or okay? And so any of the planets that are doing this, and you know, by the way, like Uranus has been retrograde several times. It's in Taurus right now. It moves so slowly that it's still only at like 4 degrees Taurus or something like that. And when it retrogrades, it barely even goes back a degree. So it's a very different kind of thing. Whereas Mercury, it's like 14 degrees. And so it scrubs over this part of your chart. And I read some people's charts where it's like they had Venus there, they had Chiron there, they had different, you know, planets there. So it's activating whatever's there. Is that what you were asking? Okay. Yeah. So it really, what it does is it gives us an opportunity, especially with Mercury retrogrades, it helps us to slow down and do some work. And I think that that's what's coming up more than I think this, oh no, you know, yeah, back up your computers, yeah, do these things. But really it's asking us to slow down and watch our minds, because the Mercury is that mental aspect of our personality, how we communicate. Where's the communication breaking down? And the fact that the last year in 2018, Mercury retrogrades happened in water signs. This year it's happening again in water signs. It's touching, you know, it's touching other signs. It's interesting. This one touched Aquarius, right? Because it's trying to give us these hints like, hey, think of the collective, think of the higher mind, think of, you know, how we are in context, right? But that, you know, Pisces is so much about devotion and spirituality and connection to the divine, but also, you know, it's a really sensitive nervous system. So it was almost like asking us to take a little soul scan this last retrograde. The next one will happen in June when the sun will be in Cancer for part of that too. So is that all right now?
Yes.
Okay.
And I think we're at, I can't tell what time it is actually. But
Yeah, haven't
we have
been.
about we have like 5 minutes.
5 minutes.
I mean, you're
Okay.
welcome to go as long as you want. I think maybe like I could do until 11:05. It looks like you have 7. You've gotten through 7 out of 14 of your slides. So.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll have to have a part 2.
We might have to have a part 2. I mean, I don't want to rush this. And I also, you know, with everything that people are pulling in, I'm curious if anybody has found something particularly useful that I can go deeper in. Most of my slides are really talking about, you know, here's the fire signs, here's the earth signs, here's the air signs.
Got it.
You know, so if there's something that, you know, in this, I talk about transits in terms of, you know, there's just complexity, right? Everything's at play.
I have a question. I guess it's a logistical question. Like in the beginning, you were talking about how do we take our chart and see what house, like that, like, how do I know which house my chart is in during this time now? Like, I know how to read my astrological chart for my birth, and I know all of those houses, but how do I put them together to see what's happening now?
Right. So what I do, and there are different ways to do this. You can look at progressed charts. You can look at different, you know, because there's this whole rabbit hole of progressed charts that every year, and I know some astrologers that are very good at reading progressive charts. One of the things that I find useful is just using my natal chart as an anchor, knowing that that's the signature I came into this world with.
Yeah.
Okay, this was what I signed up for. And this chart is for now. Okay, so this is this chart from this morning at like 9:30, just before I came on here. Now, you'll notice this line, okay, this is that horizon line. It starts the house structure. You'll notice the bottom basket, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, right? That's the bottom 6 houses, which are called your personal houses. Then you've got the top 6, right? Notice they're not the same size. right? Some of these houses are larger than others, and that has to do with our perspective from Earth. Your chart will be the same. Okay, you will have, unless you're reading whole house astrology, which is again there's so many different systems, and I don't think that any of them are wrong. I just find this is the Placidus way of looking at it. I think it's very useful because it splits the houses. So right now, the chart for now, or a couple hours ago, is that the first house is in Gemini, right? Its rising sign is Gemini. That's your ascendant. Your ascendant starts your first house. So when it's almost as if you place your chart over this,
Yeah.
and you can see where things are activated. So again, here was the moon at 1 degree Taurus. If you're looking at your own chart and you've got your moon at 1 degree Taurus, you've got a lunar return. I love to every month take my calendar and look, my moon is at 11 degrees Leo. Happened to be a time there was an eclipse at the beginning of 2019 was at 11 degrees Leo. So for me, I didn't schedule anything that day.
Yeah.
So there's ways. It's interesting. And so often I'll find that I'll get kind of in my head something, and then I'll look and I'll find that degree is actually activated by something. So pick something. I think picking the moon is really helpful, but if you're really excited about growth and expansion, you might learn where and what degree your Jupiter is. You might learn. So start small, start with one thing, and just track it. When the moon hits Jupiter for you, your natal Jupiter, right? Or your, like I said, with your moon sign, if it's being hit, if you've got your moon in Capricorn right now and everything is kind of activating it, and then by the way, the moon's amplifying that every month, because even if all those planets are staying pretty much in Capricorn, right? The moon gets involved and all of a sudden it becomes really emotional. So you might note on your calendar, on your planner, hey, how do I, check in specifically on that day? If it feels, I think sometimes it can feel like, well, I'm just tracking everything. How do I feel all the time? And so finding one thing, one practice that you can kind of notice when the energy gets activated is helpful. And so that's how I look at it. It's like I overplace it, right? So does that help?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Yeah.
Definitely. And then Sarah says you can see on astro.com, enter your birth information and go to extended chart selection and go to birth chart and current transits. And you can easily see both degrees where the transits are at.
Yes. And the ephemeris does that as well. And it can save it and you can save them. But yes, astro.com has that as well. And and so what happens is, what it looks like is your natal chart will be inside here. Oops. Sorry about that. Will be inside here, and then the now will be on the outside, and then you can see how they line up.
Got it. That's so cool.
My candle just burnt out.
Oh, nice. Well, we are actually coming to an end. Okay, tell us, I think we're all burning to know where to get a reading from you. I'm assuming that you do readings.
I do readings. I have I'm working on some projects right now. I'm working on an Astrologic Lab. If you actually want to dig into your own chart, I do readings, and all of my readings, really, they're astrologist tarot readings. So I do what I call like a 12 house reading, and I incorporate tarot. I record them and send them to you. I always work remotely. So it's like me recording a personalized podcast for you, and I send it to you, and then you do. So I do my work, then you do your work. And then if there's needed for questions, that happens. So you can email me. I have a website as well. You can check out what I am doing, what I'm up to. Right now I'm kind of brewing this Astrologic Lab because I want 5 people that I can work out. There's this harvest cycle work I've been working with based on the solar cycles, but I've been microcosming it to moon cycles. And noticing that they line up and noticing how to use that. And so if anybody's interested in that work, that's what I'm kind of calling in, and I'm about to kind of send that to people on my email list and stuff. So if you want to get on that, you can go to my website and check it out, or you can send me an email and be like, yes, I'm fucking in. But yeah, I'm trying to figure out, because going forward, what I'd like to do is teach people astrology and learn from each other, in a container. So that's what I'm up to. I also teach tarot and do all sorts of things.
Awesome.
And I'm holding a moon circle tomorrow. If anybody wants to come and really dive into the new moon energy of Aries, I'm holding a Wild Woman Project circle tomorrow as well. So, and all that information is on my website, or you can directly message me. I'm at Painted Goddess on Instagram.
All right, I'm going to stop your sharing.
Thank you.
Okay, and I'm going to stop this live on Facebook. Just want to say that you are in the Global Turn On Salon. Thank you so much for being here. This is an event that we're holding for it goes until April 5th, which is a Sunday. So for about another week and a half, we have lots of different classes and teachers coming on to talk about relevant ways to help yourself and nurture yourself during this time. We are accepting sliding scale donations, suggested donation of $20 for the whole 2 weeks. And no one is going to be turned away for lack of funds. You can PayPal me at paypal.me@Leah Rose Farber, or Venmo me at Leah Rose-Farber. And we're going to be donating 50% of those proceeds to our teachers that come on and teach. So it's a way to keep us all in business. And everything is just your presence is payment in itself, just to let you all know. Thank you so much, Jennifer. I'm going to get off Facebook here, and then I'll bring you on. I'll cancel the spotlight and